The only sound in the apartment was the ice melting in her whiskey glass. She hadn't even noticed I was sitting there. Not yet. She walked in, heels clicking like nothing was wrong, humming to herself. Humming, while unbuttoning that black coat I'd never seen before. One she probably didn't expect me to ever see. Her keys hit the counter. Her bag dropped to the floor. Then she flicked on the light. And froze. Because I was already there. Sitting cross-legged on the couch. Holding her phone. And it was still lit up. Still open to the last thing she messaged him. Still thinking about last night. You're dangerous. Smiling face with horns. She didn't say a word. Didn't move. Didn't even breathe, I think. I just tilted my head and asked, calmly, almost too softly. So who's Elliot? She blinked. Once. Like maybe if she closed her eyes and opened them again, I'd disappear. But I didn't. I kept going. You called him baby. You sent him photos from our bathroom. You told him I was clueless as ever. I mean, was that necessary? She opened her mouth, but I cut her off. No. Let me finish reading. There's a good part here, where you said I cry too much for a grown man, and that I'd probably apologize if someone mugged me. I laughed. It didn't sound right. It sounded cracked. That part actually made me laugh, Maribel. I'll give you that one. Her voice finally cracked through the air. Why are you going through my phone? Wrong question. I don't know. Maybe because you came home at 3 in the morning smelling like someone else's expensive body wash. She flinched like I'd slapped her. Then she tried to play it cool. She reached for her bag, like this was just going to be a conversation. Like she could explain it away with some eye roll and a sigh and tell me I was insecure. Again. So I stood up and walked past her. Calm, cold, focused. But I didn't go upstairs. I went to the laundry room. And I came back holding a small object wrapped in a towel. I unwrapped it slowly, deliberately. And when she saw what it was, when she really saw it, she dropped the glass. Because in my hands was her necklace. The one she said she lost at yoga. The one that was currently still entangled in another man's shirt, shoved to the back of our dryer. Yeah, he'd been here. In our house. In our bed. And he'd left his shirt behind. I held it up and looked at her. Tell me, do you want to explain the shirt? Or the necklace? Or the fact that the dryer still smells like your perfume mixed with something that isn't mine? She looked like she might collapse. And for a second, just a second, I almost felt bad. But then I remembered the text. The smirk emoji. The bathroom photos. So I just dropped the shirt on the floor, turned off the light, and walked back into the dark. This isn't the story of how she cheated. It's the story of what happened after. And let me tell you, that part's way worse. The next morning was quiet. The kind of quiet that feels intentional, like the walls themselves are holding their breath. I didn't sleep. I just sat in the kitchen with a cup of coffee I never drank, listening to the pipes groan and the refrigerator hum. Maribel eventually came downstairs. No makeup, no jewelry. Just her in that faded college hoodie she only wore when she was nervous. Not sad, nervous. There's a difference. She didn't speak right away. Just stood at the threshold, waiting for me to say something first. I didn't. I wanted her to sit with the weight of everything. Not just the texts. Not just the shirt. But what it meant. The pattern behind it. Finally, she said, "Can we talk?" I nodded, still looking at the wall, not her. "I messed up," she said. I didn't respond. I don't even know how to explain it. It was one night. It didn't mean anything. Classic line. Straight from the manual. So I asked her, which night? Because I found 2 shirts. One in the dryer, and one in the back of the linen closet behind the Christmas decorations. She froze. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. Then, you went through the closet? I looked up at her then. Just stared. That was the moment I realized she wasn't sorry I found anything. She was sorry she didn't hide it better. There's a difference. And that difference changes everything. She moved closer, put her hands on the table like we were negotiating a ceasefire. Please, Halden. Please don't go through my phone again. Don't go through my stuff. I'll tell you everything. But let's just stop the digging. Please. You ever have someone beg you not to open a door you already opened? I leaned back slowly. Let the silence build. Then I said, I already opened your Dropbox. Her face drained. See, here's the thing she didn't realize. I wasn't looking for cheating. I already had proof of that. I was looking for something worse. And I found it. She had a folder labeled junk. Inside were subfolders with dates. Inside those were photos, videos, receipts, voice memos. Some were of her. Others were of other people. I'd stumbled into her pattern. Not just infidelity. Strategy. Maribel didn't just cheat. She documented. She saved conversations. She saved photos of other men's IDs. Hotel room numbers. Times. Prices. One folder was labeled, "Not if he sues." Another, "Fall backup." It wasn't an affair. It was a system. I didn't want to believe it. I really didn't. I wanted this to be some awful misunderstanding. But the timestamps didn't lie. The file names didn't lie. She had been living a double life with an entire backup plan for if she got caught. And the worst part? One file was a draft email addressed to me. The subject line, "Before you freak out." So I asked her, still staring straight through her, "How long have you been preparing to leave me?" Her knees buckled a little. She gripped the back of the chair to steady herself. She didn't deny it. She didn't argue. She just stood there, the blood drained from her face, realizing the walls were closing in. "I wasn't going to," she whispered. "I swear. I didn't know what I wanted." But that was a lie. Because the draft email was dated 5 months ago. 5 months. Of pretending. 5 months of sleeping next to me while planning an escape. 5 months of calculated hugs, fake smiles, and taking photos of my credit card by accident while pretending to clean her phone screen. So I stood up slowly, calmly. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just said, "You're going to pack a bag. You're going to go stay at your sister's. And if you so much as try to delete one file, I'll send everything to your boss." And to his wife. Her jaw dropped. "How do you know he's married?" she gasped. Oh, there it was. Confirmation. Slipped out. That's when I knew she wasn't done shocking me. Because that man wasn't just cheating with her. He had more to lose than I did. And I was only beginning to understand what they'd gotten themselves into. I wish I could tell you I handled the next 24 hours with maturity. I wish I could say I meditated, or journaled, or talked it out with a therapist. But what I actually did, I went to the basement and rage cleaned the entire storage room in total silence, while blasting ambient thunderstorm sounds on loop just to feel something. I didn't cry. Not yet. But my hands shook every time I picked something up. Rage isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's quiet and trembling and boiling behind your teeth. Meanwhile, Maribel did exactly what I told her. Packed a bag, avoided eye contact, and left. But she didn't go to her sister's. I knew that within 2 hours because I checked the Find My app on the old iPad she forgot was still synced to her phone. That's how I watched her location ping at the Fairmont on Elridge Avenue. A boutique hotel with velvet drapes, valet parking, and the kind of lobby music that makes you feel guilty for wearing sneakers inside. And guess who was also in that same location? I cross-referenced the hotel's check-in API. Yeah, I still had access because I built part of their online booking system a year ago. And there he was. Elliot Carver. A name I hadn't heard in months. But one I knew all too well. Because Elliot Carver wasn't just some random guy. He was one of my clients. A wealthy, smug private investor who hired me 6 months ago to build a password-protected file archive for sensitive materials. He paid in advance. Never asked too many questions. Seemed normal, if not a little entitled. Now I realized what the files were probably for. Photos. Videos. Maybe of Maribel. Maybe of others. Because based on the messages I'd seen on her phone before it locked itself, Elliot wasn't her first. And he wasn't working alone. There were references I hadn't understood until now. Did you encrypt the new batch? Make sure the timestamps don't match the last pull. Tell him the system's crashing. That'll buy you time. This wasn't just cheating. This was manipulation. This was data theft. This was baiting me into giving them access to systems they shouldn't have touched. I felt sick. I had flashbacks of our anniversary dinner 6 months ago. She insisted on celebrating early that year. Said she had a work thing the next weekend. Now I wondered if the work thing was a hotel room. With Elliot. Or someone else. But it didn't stop there. As I reviewed server logs from the archive system I built for Elliot, I found a string of unusual requests, made at 3 a.m. On nights I remembered Maribel being restless. There were uploads. Large ones. PDFs, zips, encrypted containers. The weirdest part? One of the folders had my name on it. Not literally, but the file inside was named client_h_override. Key. HK. Holden King. Me. They were using my access credentials to open back doors in client systems. She hadn't just betrayed me emotionally. She'd used me. My trust. My laptop. My presence in the tech space. While I sat in bed watching true crime documentaries, She was in the next room uploading confidential files to a private server with someone she kissed on the elevator 10 minutes later. And it was my fingerprint on all of it. That's when the fear set in. Not heartbreak, fear. Legal fear. Because if this thing unraveled, it wouldn't be her name on the contract. It wouldn't be her name in the access logs. It would be mine. And that's when I knew. I couldn't just sit back and wait for this to explode. I needed to get ahead of it. So I started documenting everything. Phone screenshots, Dropbox logs, server entries, file hashes, locations, timestamps. I created an encrypted local archive, disconnected from the cloud. I printed a physical log and put it in a sealed envelope. I even dropped off a copy with my friend Julian, a lawyer I met through a mutual at a local trivia night. Told him not to open it unless something happened to me. He thought I was being dramatic. I wasn't. Because that night, around 11:40 p.m., I got a text from an unknown number. It just said, "Stop digging or you'll regret it." It wasn't signed, but I already knew who it was. And I also knew they had no idea what I was about to do next. By the time the second anonymous text came through, "You think you're clever, but you're not the only one with backups," I'd already stopped shaking. That terrified version of me, the one who used to sit in silence hoping my wife would come home early and smell like the truth, he was gone. In his place was someone new, someone dangerous, someone willing to play dumb if it meant playing long. That's when I decided to go see Elliot, in person, not at the Fairmont, not at the bar where I assumed they met, but at his office. The one with the glass walls and the ridiculous oil painting of a tiger on the back wall, like he was auditioning for a villain role in a Netflix show. He didn't know I knew about the files, or the texts, or that I'd seen surveillance footage of him stepping into my garage 2 months ago while I was on a business trip in Denver. That's right. I found that too. The Ring camera in the alley had caught it. Him, wearing gloves, entering through the side. 38 minutes later, he left. My garage wasn't broken into. Nothing was missing. But he had been there. What was he planting? What was he looking for? I had questions, and I was done waiting. So I booked a fake consultation through his assistant, using my middle name, Keller, and a disposable number. Said I was a startup founder looking for private investment in a pet wellness app. I knew that'd get his attention. Nothing made Elliot drool like scalable tech and a chance to feel smarter than the guy across the table. I wore my nicest shirt, the one Maribel always said made me look less like an IT guy. I brought a folder filled with fake pitch documents. But what I didn't mention in the appointment, the pen in my pocket wasn't a pen. It was a voice recorder. High quality. Long battery. Tiny as hell. When I walked into his office, Elliot greeted me with that fake laugh, fake teeth energy I remembered all too well. He didn't recognize me. That's how little I mattered to him. I'd shaken this man's hand before. Twice. And he looked at me now like I was a brand new wallet waiting to be emptied. "Nice to meet you, Keller," he said, offering that rehearsed smile. "Tell me about this wellness app." I played along. Let him interrupt me 3 times. Let him talk down to me. Let him sip that $6 espresso while I fumbled my pitch. And then, when the moment was just awkward enough, I slid the fake folder back into my bag and asked, "Did she tell you I knew?" His whole face changed. The mask didn't just slip, it shattered. His jaw tensed. His eyes darted. And for a full 5 seconds, he didn't say a word. That's when I knew I had him. Not because of what he said, but because of what he didn't. I leaned in. "Maribel, the videos, the files, the burner phone. You left your shirt in my house, Elliot. My dryer. You weren't careful. Not enough." Still no answer. Then, finally, he smiled again, but it wasn't the same smile. It was darker. Less teeth. More teeth gritting. "You should be very careful what you say inside other people's offices, Halden." So, he remembered me now. "Funny," I said. "You didn't remember me when I walked in. That'll help in court, I think." He stood up, slow and deliberate, like he wanted to intimidate me. But the second he moved, the receptionist knocked on the glass door. Saved by the bell. I stood too. Smiled. This was great. I'll follow up with my pitch deck. Thanks again for the espresso. He didn't shake my hand. He didn't even move. Just stared at me like he couldn't decide whether to punch me or pay someone else to. When I got back to my car, I uploaded the recording to 3 different encrypted drives. Because in that meeting, buried in the pauses and veiled threats, were details. Details only someone guilty would say. Details I was going to share, very soon, but not with the police. Not yet. First, I had to deal with someone else. Because when I got home, there was a letter waiting for me. Not typed. Handwritten. No return address. Inside was a single sentence. You're looking at the wrong man. And tucked beneath it, a photograph of Maribel with someone who wasn't Elliot. Someone I hadn't seen before, but who looked exactly like her. And the timestamp? For years ago. 2 years before we got married. For a full hour, I just stared at the photograph. It was clearly Maribel. Same cheekbones, same tiny scar above her right eyebrow from when she slipped on our porch last winter. Same crooked smile that used to knock the air out of my lungs before I realized it was probably never meant for me. She was sitting at an outdoor cafe in the photo, laughing with a man I didn't recognize. He had his hand on hers. The moment felt natural. Like they weren't hiding. Like this was real and my marriage was the cover story. But then I turned the photo over. And the name scribbled on the back wasn't hers. It said, Emmy and Cal, September 2019 Marseille. Not Maribel. Emmy. And suddenly I realized I didn't know what the hell was going on. There were only 2 possibilities, and both were bad. Either that photo was doctored and someone was trying to mess with me, or my wife had been living under an alias, and her real life didn't start with me. It started before me. Somewhere else. With someone else. Marseille? She told me she'd never left the country. Said she didn't like flying. Claimed she had anxiety about customs and crowded airports. But there she was, in France, looking like she belonged there. And the man, Cal, looked too comfortable to be a fling. This wasn't a one-night memory. This was someone who had probably thought she belonged to him. I couldn't breathe. I sat on the floor like someone had knocked the wind out of me. My hands were cold. My stomach kept twisting like it wanted to reject reality. And then I remembered something. Last year, we got into an argument because I asked her about the way she spelled her middle name on some insurance forms. She signed Emmeline, but all her official documents said Marie. When I pointed it out, she said I was being controlling, that it was just a nickname. I didn't push it. Now I wish I had. I went upstairs, dug through the fireproof safe in the closet, and pulled out her passport. The one she kept locked away just in case of emergency. Page for confirmed it. Issued in 2016. Under the name Emmeline Grace Heller. Not Maribel King. Not even close. And the signature? Matched the back of the photo. I stood there, heart pounding, while pieces of the last 6 years fell into place. Like shattered glass, slowly rearranging into something jagged and cruel. She'd reinvented herself. She hadn't married me as Maribel out of romance. She'd done it to disappear. From what? I didn't know yet. But it wasn't just cheating anymore. This wasn't just betrayal. It was erasure. The version of her I knew didn't exist. Or maybe she never did. So I did what any fool in love would do when he finally wakes up inside a nightmare. I stopped pretending. I pulled up my laptop. I started searching every variation of her real name I could think of. Emmeline Heller. Emmeline Grace. Emmy Heller. I filtered by dates, states, cities, even foreign embassies. And then, finally, on a dusty old community blog for an art residency in France, I found it. A group photo. Date stamped 2019. Her, or Emmy, smiling in a group of about 9 people. Painters. Poets. One man had a cello on his back. And there, off to the side, was Cal. The same man from the photo. He was tagged. Calvin Truro. I clicked. Opened his profile. And my heart stopped. Because Calvin Truro was listed as missing. Declared vanished 3 years ago. Last seen, you guessed it, in Marseille. And the last person known to have contact with him? Emmeline Grace Heller. I slammed the laptop shut so fast the screen bent. This was no longer about heartbreak. This was something darker. Much darker. Because if what I was starting to believe was even halfway true, then my wife wasn't just lying. She was running. And now I had to ask the question I didn't want to ask. Was I next? I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even try. The photo. The alias. The passport. The man named Calvin Truro. His missing persons page said he vanished without a trace. Last seen boarding a ferry that never docked due to a weather delay. The authorities assumed he drowned. No body was found. No formal investigation followed. Just a footnote in a sleepy French village paper and a small reward posted by a grieving sister. But I knew better. Because the woman last seen with him didn't die. She married me. At 3:12 a.m., I created a throwaway email and wrote to the contact listed on the old residency blog. a woman named Giada Pellegrini, who apparently handled artist records and digital archives. I asked if they had anything left behind by Calvin. Said I was writing an article on the 2019 residency for a university journal and wanted to honor his work. She replied 30 minutes later. Said they didn't have much, but one of the interns had backed up some of the digital work into a private Dropbox before the artist profiles were purged. She sent the link. There were 57 files inside. I clicked on the first one expecting artwork. But it wasn't. It was a video diary. Calvin had been recording himself. They were simple entries, just him, his laptop camera, grainy hostile lighting, the sound of mopeds outside. He talked about his writing process, his insomnia, his romantic life, and by entry 14, he mentioned a name. There's something magnetic about Emmy. She keeps everything at arm's length, but when she talks to you, it feels like you're inside some secret story she's writing. Entry 18. She told me not to ask where she was from. Said the past was like bad wallpaper. You just cover it with something brighter. Entry 22. She disappeared last night. Came back just before dawn. Said she was walking by the cliffs, but her dress was wet. I didn't ask. Entry 28. I think she knows I'm filming these. I caught her looking through my bag. Entry 30. She kissed me today. Told me she'd never had someone ruin her routine so perfectly. I think I'm falling. I think it's dangerous. Then the entries got shorter. Entry 33 was just him staring into the camera, eyes wide, whispering. Someone followed us back to the villa. She said not to worry, that she'd take care of it. But I'm scared. I don't think she's who she says she is. Entry 34 was corrupted. Entry 35 was the last one. It wasn't a video. It was a text file. Just 2 sentences. If anything happens to me, check her documents. She has more than one name. Don't trust the smile. I sat back, my breath caught in my throat, hands shaking. The timestamp on the file? 1 day before he vanished. 1 day. And no one saw it. No one followed up. No one thought to check the woman he'd fallen for. The woman who insisted she didn't have a passport. Who said she'd never left the country. Who told me she only ever had one name. And I married her. There was no version of this where I could pretend I was overreacting anymore. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't heartbreak. This was something colder, deeper, layered in half-truths and forgotten bodies and years of careful reinvention. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I called her sister. The real one. The one Maribel, or Emmeline, had only let me meet twice, and both times she'd been quiet. Nervous. Something in her eyes always seemed like she wanted to say more than she was allowed. I asked her one question. Do you know where your sister really came from? There was a long pause on the other end of the phone. Then she whispered, you need to come see me. But don't tell her we talked. Click. That was it. But it was enough to send a chill down my spine. Because in 6 years, that woman had never broken her silence. And now she was afraid. Which meant I wasn't crazy. I was just finally catching up. I didn't tell anyone I was leaving town. Not my coworker. Not my neighbor. I didn't even leave a note. I just filled the tank, tossed a hoodie over my t-shirt, and drove the 2.5 hours in near total silence. No music. No podcasts. Just the sound of tires on damp asphalt and my own brain spinning like a blender with the lid off. Her sister's name was Lorna. Short, wiry, always kept her hands buried in the sleeves of her oversized sweaters like she didn't want to touch the world directly. I remembered thinking she seemed scared of something every time I saw her. Not nervous, scared. She lived in a 1-story ranch house outside of town with more streetlights than people. When she opened the door, she didn't hug me. She didn't smile. She didn't ask how I was doing. She just stepped aside and said, you need to see something. We didn't talk much as she led me down the hallway. The house smelled like cinnamon and old books. Photos lined the walls, but none of Maribel, or Emmeline, I should say. It struck me then. In 6 years of marriage, I'd never seen a single childhood photo of her. Not one. I assumed they'd all been lost in some moving accident, she once mentioned. But Lorna had all of them. She opened a linen closet at the end of the hall, reached behind a stack of old quilts and pulled out a wooden box, no bigger than a microwave, with brass edges and a padlock on the front. She handed me a key. I shouldn't be doing this, she whispered. But you're already inside it now. Just promise me you'll leave when it's over. Don't get sucked under like the others. The others? I didn't ask. I unlocked the box, opened the lid, and immediately stepped back. hand over my mouth. Inside were dozens of envelopes, torn open, but neatly preserved, all addressed to different versions of the same name. Emmeline Heller, Emma H. E. Grace, Marie Heller, even Emmy G. All sent from different states, some from Canada, a few international. Each envelope contained a photo. In every one, she was with a different man. In one, she was hiking through what looked like Oregon, holding hands with a bearded guy in his 20s. In another, she was sitting at a piano beside a silver-haired man who looked old enough to be her father, but the way she leaned into him said otherwise. In yet another, she was on a boat, laughing with someone in a Navy uniform. Every photo had a date. Every man was different. And every one of them, every single one, had either a missing persons report, a sudden career withdrawal, or a life relocation story that didn't check out. I knew this because taped to the underside of the lid was a spreadsheet. A printed spreadsheet, labeled in careful handwriting. Timeline, EGH incidents, non-media flagged only. It listed names, dates, locations, status. Some said disengaged, clean. Others, unknown, possible collapse. One had a red pen mark that simply read, closed. Don't revisit. I was shaking. Why do you have this? I asked Lorna, my voice hoarse. She didn't answer at first. She just sat down on the edge of the hallway bench and said, because she's not who you think she is. She never was. And I was the only one who kept track. I asked her the only question that mattered. Has she hurt anyone? Lorna looked up at me with those watery eyes and said, only people who get too close. I sat down hard on the floor. My head was spinning. My throat felt dry. Then she added something I will never forget. You weren't supposed to last this long. I think that's why she started slipping. She only ever stays 2 years. 3 max. You were different. And that made you dangerous. I wanted to deny it. Say she was paranoid. That this was all some tragic misinterpretation. But the box, the spreadsheet, the faces, there were too many for it to be coincidence. And in the bottom of the box, a flash drive. Lorna handed it to me without a word. It had one label on it, written in ink. If he finds out. That night, I checked into a motel 3 towns over and plugged the drive into my laptop, hands trembling. There was one file, one video, and in it was Emmeline, looking straight at the camera. No smile, no makeup, no lies. And the first words out of her mouth, if you're watching this, it means I underestimated you. Her eyes in the video were cold, but not angry. Calculated, yes, but not cruel. If you're watching this, it means I underestimated you. It means you looked under too many rocks, dug in places I hoped would stay buried. She sighed. This isn't a confession. I'm not sorry, but I am tired. And if you're still watching, you deserve something, not closure, but truth. I sat still, watching her speak like she was reading from a script only she understood. She looked younger. The video was likely recorded long before I ever met her. Maybe even before Calvin. That thought haunted me. Every time I started over, I swore it would be the last. That I'd settle down. That I'd stop running. But I always brought the storm with me. And you were different. She paused. You were kind. Too kind. You made me laugh when I forgot how. You made me breakfast. You cried during movies. You told the truth even when it hurt. You were never the mark. You were the exception. There was a long silence. That's why I left before it got worse. The screen went black. That was it. No confession. No apology. But also, no manipulation. No threat. No more lies. She was gone. Truly gone. That night, I sat on the edge of the motel bed and realized something strange. I wasn't broken. Not really. Not like I thought I'd be. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for someone to come home late. I wasn't scanning texts behind someone's back or trying to decode moods over dinner. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was free. In the days that followed, I turned everything over to a friend of mine in law enforcement, confidentially. Not to punish her, but to protect myself. To close the loop. To make sure the story didn't end with me as just another name in someone's spreadsheet. I moved out of the house. Got a small apartment above a bookstore downtown. Nothing fancy, but quiet. Peaceful. I started seeing a therapist. We talk about boundaries, guilt, forgiveness. Mostly, we talk about how to stop blaming myself for things I didn't break. A month later, I got a letter. No return address. No signature. Inside was a single photo. Me, sitting on a park bench, smiling, unaware. The caption scribbled on the back. You were never the problem. That was the last I ever heard from her. But honestly, that was enough. I've rebuilt. I've made peace. I've even started dating again. Slowly, carefully, but without fear. Because I know now that my softness isn't weakness. My kindness wasn't a flaw. And loving someone fully, even the wrong person, doesn't make you a fool. It makes you human. And that's something she may never understand. But I do.